I appreciate everyone showing up this afternoon. We have the second session in our 3-day-long conference discussing the sports and the LGBT experience. I, again, want to thank everybody who's involved, Evan, Brody, and all others who have taken part in this. I'm going to thank somebody else, but I'm going to introduce them in just a second. But also, wanted to mention to you that tomorrow at noon and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there will be 2 more sessions. At noon, you get free food. And there will be a program in the Jeff Cowan Forum, ASCJ 207. There will also be a separate session at 2 in the afternoon tomorrow afternoon in the same forum. And then Thursday, there will be another noon session with another meal. We feed you well here. And after that, there'll be another session in here during this class once again. So we appreciate everybody coming out. Even those of you who had to come out, and appreciate you taking the time. I do want to introduce the Master of Ceremonies for this afternoon, but I would like to make mention of one thing right for just a moment. Marty, I'm warning you right now, we're hiring him away from you. If I have to sell my firstborn to get him, we're hiring him away from you. So I'm throwing down the gauntlet now. It's going to happen in the future. Adam Rogers has done exceptional work in putting together this program with Evan Brody, and he is going to be the Master of Ceremonies this afternoon discussing sports and entrepreneurial journalism. Adam Rogers.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Amel Rogers, and I would like to officially welcome you to the Sports and the LGBT Experience Conference. We've been planning this for quite a while, so it's a beautiful sight to see you all here. I appreciate you being here. I'd like to start off by thanking Dan Durbin, the director of the Annenberg Institute for Sports Media and Society, for entrusting this conference to Evan and I. It's been an incredible experience. My 2 biggest passions in life are sports and LGBT issues, and so it's just been an incredible experience to be able to be a part of this conference with Evan, and we'd like to thank Dan for giving us the liberty to be able to put on the type of conference that we would want to attend, and just for his leadership and guidance throughout this entire process. We'd also like to thank John Hackett. I don't think he's here right now. He's off slaving away, but John also works in the Annenberg Institute for Sports Media and Society. And we have 3 days, 6 sessions, 23 speakers, and a significant amount of logistics to make it all happen. And John has just done a masterful job handling all of those logistics. For over 5 years, I've worked for the USC Annenberg Lear Center, a research center that studies and shapes the impact of entertainment and media on society. It's a place that I feel very lucky to work at, and a place that, unfortunately for Dan, I'm very happy working at. And the reason why I'm so happy working there is because they create a culture of collaboration and growth and innovation that has allowed me to be able to be here today. And so for that, I want to thank our director, Marty Kaplan, and our managing director and director of research, Johanna Blakely, for allowing me the opportunity to work on this conference. I appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank our last partner, the USC LGBT Resource Center. They were instrumental in getting the word out about this conference. And we have an amazing 3 days planned. I hope that you'll be able to partake in some of our other sessions tomorrow and Thursday as well. But today we have a treat, something I've been looking forward to for a very long time. Later this afternoon, we will be bringing on stage the first openly gay former NFL player, Mr. David Kopay. Even though he's under the weather today, he still is a trooper and came out, and he's absolutely delightful and just extraordinarily inspirational, and I can't wait for you to have the opportunity to hear from him. But first, I've been waiting to interview our first panelists for a very, very long time. In the year 2000, I was a sports-obsessed, closeted teenager in Colorado, and I heard a news story about a guy in Massachusetts named Corey Johnson who came out to his high school football teammates. And I immediately went to the computer and Googled him, or did whatever we did in 2000 before Google to find out information about people. And the first site that came up was a link to Outsports.com. and my mind was blown. There was a website just for gay sports fans. It was like they were speaking directly to me, and I had no idea that anything like that could exist. And they've done that for gay sports fans all over the world, created a home, basically. And for 14 years now, Outsports.com has been the ultimate destination spot for all news in the LGBT sports universe. The site's founders, Sid Zeigler and Jim Buzinski, have broke countless LGBT sports stories, and they've served as expert voices in the mainstream media in places like the New York Times and Sports Illustrated, ESPN's Outside the Lines, HBO's Real Sports, just to name a few. And they spend their entire days and nights immersed in the gay sports world. And I'm thrilled to be able to speak with them and have you be able to hear from them. So please welcome to the stage the founders of Outsports.com, Sid Zeigler and Jim Buzinski. Thank you very much for being here to both of you. We appreciate it.
I'm Jim, that's Sid.
So we're in a room full of journalism and communication students, and every entrepreneurial journey has a good origin story. So how was Outsports created?
Well, Jim and I are, we say we're partners, but we're not partners. We're just business partners. And we were friends before we were business partners. And we went on a vacation together. This was 1999 in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And I was reading Sports Illustrated, and Jim was reading the Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal in 1999 was essentially front to back internet and tech. And we started talking about this beginning of the NFL season. There wasn't really anywhere for gay people to talk about the NFL and other sports with other gay people, because being a gay sports fan in 1999 was foreign to the sports people and it was foreign to the gay people. So we just started. I was working at Disney at the time as a development executive. Jim was a freelance editor at the LA Times, and we just started talking about building something where we could bring these people together to just talk to one another. And we launched in November of 1999, and Yahoo picked us up, made a site of the day in the first week or two, and people just started coming more and more to the site and writing more stories and introducing people to one another, and it just kind of took off organically.
So you both have backgrounds in journalism, but did you envision the site as just a community for gay sports fans, or did you envision it as a place where people would get their news that you would be writing and being journalists?
I don't think we really had a plan. I mean, we just wanted to write for ourselves. We both love the NFL. Unfortunately, he's a Patriots fan, and I'm a huge Peyton Manning fan, so we've been fighting now for 14 years over that.
But I've won most of those, so
not lately though. But so we just wanted to write for ourselves as gay guys who like sports, and a lot of the stuff we wrote necessarily wasn't gay. It was simply our take on the NFL or the NCAA. But then we started hearing from athletes and coaches saying, I want to tell my story. And so it kind of grew from there, where we wound up becoming a news source. And then the way the media work, if you are deemed to be an expert, they call you. So no one else was writing about this. So we had early calls from the New York Times and from CNN to talk about these issues when people were coming out, because just at the same time, Billy Beane, not the A's general manager, but the former Dodger, came out as gay on the front page of the New York Times. He was actually outed in the restaurant column in the Miami Herald when his partner opened the restaurant. But the New York Times did a story, and then so this vacuum was filled by nobody but us, just because we happened to be the only two guys doing it. So there was no grand design, but we now consider ourselves a news source.
Okay. And so in retrospect, it was sort of a kind of blogging before blogging started. Do you consider yourself journalists, consider yourself bloggers, community orders, or?
I consider myself a writer. It doesn't matter what I'm writing, whether I'm blogging a great story that Deadspin uncovered or something that I've spent months and months and months on. I'm going to write whatever's out there. So I don't really worry about what label it is. If you're writing good stuff and uncovering good stories, people in the media will pay attention to what you're doing.
And what was the audience reaction like? Did you have a vast audience from the start, or did it have to grow over time?
It came over time, and one of the things, we started a discussion board just for other people to talk about whatever, and it became very popular. because that was their outlet, because a lot of these people were on discussion boards that would be set up, say, by the the Raider fans discussion boards, and they felt ostracized if they brought up anything that might hint the fact that they were gay. So they're the one site where they can talk about how the Red Sox were doing on the field and who the hot Red Sox were, and no one was kind of giving them crap about it. So that was sort of the start of our audience, but it just kind of grew through kind of word of mouth and then media links, and so it wasn't like the audience was like zero when it started, and it just had to build from there.
And what's interesting, despite how much culture has changed, and certainly you guys in this room most of you perceive LGBT people very differently from when Jim was your age or I was your age. If you go to a lot of media sites still, Fallon Fox was a transgender MMA fighter, and she just fought for a championship a couple weeks ago. There's horrible, horrible things people say about her and other gay people in the mainstream media on their discussion boards. So Outsports is still a mostly safe place, where a lot of other places still, despite the advances, are not safe.
Do you think that the internet hostility toward LGBT people has decreased since you got started? I mean, we still see things with Fallon Fox, but do you think overall it's on a good trend?
Well, I think a lot of the homophobes are quieter these days, and Pro Football Talk is a really popular, probably the biggest NFL sports blog. And 5 years ago, if they did a story on an athlete in favor of gay marriage, there'd be a lot of critical comments about gays. Now those voices are drowned out, and people are basically saying, well, who cares what your sexual orientation is? So I think the culture has shifted to where people are kind of more accepting, and now you would hope that if the guy can play for your team, and there's actually a project started by an NHL scout called You Can Play, and they've gotten NHL players and players from other sports to simply give that message: if you can play, you can play. And I think that's more the prevailing attitude.
And the other piece is that there's been a shift in how a lot of the blogs and writers handle it. A lot of you probably know Deadspin. Deadspin loves to talk about wangs and dicks, and they're very off-color site. But one of the things that they won't tolerate is this. And when athletes say really bad homophobic things, they attack them and call them behind the times and among other things that I probably shouldn't say in this room. But there's been a shift in how the blogs and how a lot of writers are handling that kind of language.
So speaking of shifts, after 13 years of being on your own, you were recently acquired by Vox Media's SB Nation. How did that come about, and how have your daily lives changed since SB Nation came aboard?
Well, it came about, a friend of mine works for the New York Times, and he had wanted to do a story on Outsports, and then for whatever reason he didn't. They passed it off to a guy named John Branch, who's a phenomenal writer. And John just did a profile of our site as what was going to be the launch of a series of stories on LGBTs in sports by the New York Times. And for whatever reason, they started with Outsports, and I think it ended with Outsports because John got shifted to something else, and so that project kind of died. But somebody at SB Nation, which is an amalgamation of like 300 blogs, saw our story, and somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who contacted Sid, and then the kind of negotiating started. So it kind of just happened, basically the power of the New York Times.
And how have you found it? What is it like to be acquired by a big company?
Well, it was a first. I mean, most sports companies aren't out there looking to acquire gay publications. And we were in a unique opportunity, I think, covering sports, something that's very mainstream, and covering it in a way that no one else is covering it in the media. So we were, it was the kind of the perfect storm where we represented something that, and how we found it, it's been great. I mean, the people at SB Nation are incredibly LGBT friendly. They let us do whatever we want, even when we want to post pictures of attractive athletes. They don't tell us not to, and it's nice. So we're able to continue to be what we want to be, and then they've just been completely supportive. A lot of the stories, that they've invested resources into some of the stories that we've done as well, and some of that we have coming up.
Terrific. The journalism students here are entering an uncertain workforce where the prospects of being entrepreneurial and starting your own independent venture is probably pretty attractive to some. Knowing now what you have went through in the last 14 years, would you recommend that to them, or do you recommend kind of going into the regular traditional newsroom?
I think I'm not sure what there is a traditional newsroom anymore. I mean, I also work at the LA Times, and that is, I mean, everybody's now, it's all about the online, it's all about the internet. So I think one thing I would encourage is everybody to have multimedia skills, know how to operate a camera, know how to operate not a video camera, a regular still camera, know how to edit video. That's one thing I don't know how to do, and I wish I knew how to do that because video is huge. I mean, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. We're seeing recently where some of the guy who founded eBay is investing a ton of money into a new journalism site, and there was a story in the New York Times yesterday about how a lot of the people in tech are investing in journalism. So I think journalism is thriving, but the traditional modes are not thriving, meaning newspapers, I mean, you know, they're the dinosaurs, the print edition, but the brand is still there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. So I think people should just kind of look wherever, and you're finding a lot of non-traditional ways to sort of, you know, have a voice. And I think that's a good thing. It's also a little scary because a lot of the security isn't there. The old days you got a job at a paper, you were there maybe, you know, for life, and you advanced up. It's not as easy that way anymore, but at least I know, you know, there's a thriving sort of journalism culture in the country, just that so much of it's moved online.
Can I ask the audience a question? How many of you want to work in sports media? Okay, how many of you are actually working right now in sports media? Blogging or something. You guys have a huge step ahead of the other people who did not raise their hand the second time. And if you want to get into sports media or media in general, you live in Los Angeles. You have access to the internet. Start writing, take your camera out, get a press pass to get to the Trojans games. I mean, do whatever you can to just start producing material and hone your craft, because if you leave school with a resume and some content that you've created, it just puts you way ahead.
Terrific. Let's shift to sports a little bit. The dangerous anti-gay legislation from Russia intersecting with the upcoming Sochi Olympics has been probably the biggest story in gay sports recently. It's produced a wide variety of strategies of how the community should be responding. These range from vodka boycotts to calls for a boycott of the entire Olympics to my favorite, Johnny Weir, figure skater, on the Olbermann show, condemning the boycotts and saying really smart things whilst donning a beautiful, chic Russian military outfit, as only Johnny Weir can. What strategies do you think will be the most effective in not only protecting athletes during the Olympics, but also creating a safer environment for LGBT Russians moving forward?
Well, it's hard for me to address LGBTs in Russian. I mean, it's such a different culture. I think for athletes, I think the fears are overblown. I mean, I don't think the Russians are that stupid to throw in jail an Olympic athlete. It would be a huge international incident. But I think visibility is what's the key. We're seeing a lot of straight Olympians speak out against the laws. You have probably could be the general manager or coach, probably general manager of the U.S. team, Brian Burke, whose son was openly gay, who died in a car crash, who's become a big gay activist, saying he's going to go there wearing a rainbow pin, and kind of dares the Russians to stop him. And so that's the kind of stuff that's talked about. I think boycott, everybody agrees, is a bad idea because if you're not there, your voice isn't being heard. So I think we're hearing people there. I'm not sure actively what can actually be done. I know the Russian Parliament yesterday tabled one of the worst parts of the anti-gay law, which would have literally taken children out of the homes of parents who were found to be lesbian and gay. The word is they're tabling it until after the games, and so I'm not sure it's going to have a big impact, but it's about the most I think we can do right now.
Sid?
I don't know. I was part of the chorus overblowing this issue, and now I kind of think we overblew it. If they're talking to LGBT Russians, they are not being arrested on the street. I mean, I know a guy who's a chemistry teacher, a high school chemistry teacher who lives in Russia, lives in Moscow. They know, the government knows he's an LGBT activist. He's still teaching high school. And I think, I don't know, they say it's not great there to be out, but they can still live their lives. I'm not sure the Olympics really can change anything. I don't know as anybody can change the Russian government. We can try to put pressure on them, but they're going to do what they're going to do, and they really don't give a crap what the United States thinks.
Have you been satisfied with the International Olympic Committee's response to it? Putting all of that aside, just looking at the issue of an anti-gay legislation in this country, how should the IOC and the USOC respond?
Well, the USOC added sexual orientation to their non-discrimination policy, though that's a good step. It's not going to change anything in Russia. The IOC has essentially actually been quite honest. And I think Jim and I disagree a little bit on this. There's nothing they can do. They know the Russians aren't going to arrest athletes off the street. They know that would be an international incident. They know it would be a disaster. And people want to pressure the IOC to say this and say that and do that. Nothing the IOC does is going to change anything in Russia. So the IOC has pretty much said, we're talking to them, everything's going to be fine during the Olympics, and people want the IOC to do more, but I just don't think there's anything more they can do.
Jim, do you disagree?
Not really. I mean, I think a lot of it is that they have these great highfalutin statements about all this stuff, and the bottom line, they're a business that's designed to make as much money and have the games go well. So I think they don't want to do anything to affect the bottom line. So they're not going to make waves, even if they thought they could make some change.
Okay. Bringing it back to America, 2013. Started off with former 49ers lineman Kwame Harris being outed by a domestic dispute with his boyfriend. Then 49er Chris Culliver makes anti-gay remarks, and suddenly gay players are the biggest topic during the Super Bowl media day. In March, CBS reports a gay NFL player is strongly considering coming out. In April, Brendan Ayanbadejo says that 4 NFL players are going to have a joint coming out. Then Brittany Griner, Jason Collins, Robbie Rogers all come out, which indicates that maybe the floodgates are opening and everybody's going to do this en masse. But here we are, not only have more pro athletes not come out, but Jason Collins still doesn't have a team. So a couple of questions. First, is 2013 the biggest year in gay sports history that you guys have encountered? And second, what happened? Why did the momentum stop? Why didn't we have the floodgates open?
I think it's always been more of a leaky faucet than floodgates. I mean, I think everybody who's gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans comes out on their own terms, and just because somebody comes out doesn't mean you're ready to do it. And I think that's the thing that a lot of the media missed, that when Jason came out, and I think some people probably waiting to see what would happen. When Jason came out, Jason did it for Jason most of all, and he said how happy he is that even if he doesn't get a team, he doesn't have a regret of doing it. I think the gayest month we had was in May of 2011 when Kobe said faggot and Joakim Noah said faggot, and there were probably like 30 stories. That was huge that day.
It was a gay month.
Yeah, and but I do. Your point's well taken. I think everyone assumes. I mean, Dave Kopay, who's in the audience, came out in 1975 and has been waiting for someone active to come out ever since. And I think people come out on their own terms for their own reasons. And so I don't know that necessarily just one guy coming out is going to kind of change things, but it certainly changes the conversation.
Well, so along those lines, Ayanbadejo and Jason Collins and LZ Granderson from ESPN have all stated publicly that they know of professional athletes who are closeted. I presume that you two may know a few as well. We live in a world of TMZ and Twitter, and where it seems impossible for celebrities to keep any kind of a secret. How are you able to stay closeted at that level in 2013? And should they be worried that they will be outed through some unwanted means?
We have a complicit media, and the sports media who doesn't really want to address these issues. They believe that it's interesting. We'll talk to journalists who will ask athletes about where they grew up and their family life and their wives and their college life and their fraternity. But then when you say, well, why don't you ask them about if they're gay? Oh, I can't ask personal questions. So for some reason, this whole area is deemed off limits by a lot of journalists. Jim and I, we just don't play by that rule. So we ask people this question. I was at the NFLPA had a rookie symposium in LA. Not a rookie symposium, but a rookie premiere event. They bring a bunch of rookies here. Manti Te'o was here this year. and I can't even remember who
Robert
else.
Griffin
Robert Griffin III was here last year, and Trent Richardson. And so I went last year and again this year, and I literally said, I'd go up to Amon Green and Javon Curse and Trent Richardson and say, I want to ask you some questions about gay issues. They kind of nod and say, okay. And it was unbelievable how willing the athletes were to talk to me about the issues. And a couple times, somebody from the NFLPA or the NFL would kind of tug on my jacket and say, we really don't want you asking those questions. You need to like couch it differently. But the athletes were okay with it. And so if journalists are just willing to do their job about an issue that is front and center in our world right now, gay marriage and gay athletes, then these barriers will be broken down completely. But I've said for years the biggest reason we haven't advanced more is the media. They're not doing their job.
Also, for start, one, we've never outed anybody at Outsports, and we never even try to, we never investigate anybody. It's not our job. If they want to come out, they come out. But I think the thing with the media is that if they see, say, a heterosexual actor with a woman, they assume it's a girlfriend, and so TMZ's there. For someone to be known as gay, they have to publicly acknowledge it. If they saw you and me together and you were a famous athlete, they would never want to make that assumption. They would want you to say it. So I think they hold gay people to a different, higher standard, that you have to declare it. If you don't declare it, then we don't know. So I think that's what keeps a lot of the mainstream media from even touching the subject. There's an NFL player who's a free agent, who on some of the African-American gossip blogs, there's been a lot of talk about him and his alleged ex-boyfriend. But the mainstream media has not touched it. I mean, Deadspin touched it and Pro Football Talk, but no one else has even touched the fact that there's rumors about him. And we only wrote about it because he said he wasn't gay, and then there was talk about was he being blackballed. He's a free agent and in a position where there might be some demand, and he doesn't have a job. And the questions are, is it because he's too old and wants too much money, or because the fact that people suspect he's gay?
What do you think?
Beats me.
It's the same thing with Jason Collins. And he is Kerry Rhodes. He's a 31-year-old free agent safety. Jason Collins is a 34-year-old free agent center who's 6'9", not 7 feet. I don't know why they keep saying he's 7 feet. They're getting older. They're getting more expensive. The veteran minimums continue to go up every year. And so, you know, you're talking about, it's the same reason Chris Kluwe got cut, a straight LGBT activist. He's a $1.5 million punter. They brought in a $500,000 punter to replace him, who's, all right, I won't comment publicly on how better or worse he is, but he's doing a fine job. So they saved $1 million in their salary. And these guys, they could, instead of bringing in Kerry or Jason, they can bring in somebody who's 23, mold them, cost them a lot less. It's math. That's a big part of the sports business.
You mentioned Kobe earlier. When Kobe called an NBA ref an anti-gay pejorative, he was fined $100,000 by the NBA. They then settled on $50,000 as the going rate. For other sports, in Major League Baseball and Major League Soccer, it appears to be a 3-game suspension for saying any anti-gay language. NASCAR just fined a driver $10,000 for saying something bad. But in the National Football League and the National Hockey League, they don't appear to levy any fine, suspension, or punishment for the use of anti-gay language. Which league has it right?
Some of it is, and at least in the NFL, has there been an on-field slur recently?
That's the problem. When I've talked to the NFL, they've said we only address on-field language. Now, somebody gets arrested, somebody rapes a woman, but language they only address on-field.
So some of the NFL stuff has been people saying stuff on Twitter about a fan or something, whereas in basketball, clearly was Kobe saying it, not just about the one F word, but calling him, was a referee too, so there was that instance. So I'd be curious to see what would happen. Joey Porter, a former linebacker for the Steelers back in like 2006, called Kellen Winslow Jr. a faggot during a game and got fined $10,000. I'm curious to see what they would do today. I would hope they would suspend him if something like that happened in 2013.
Well, so let's talk about it on Twitter. I know the athletes here have to hopefully take classes on how to be responsible with their tweets. A lot of professional athletes aren't, and it seems like you guys report on the same story over and over again that goes a little something like this. Athlete says or tweets something disparaging about gay people, and the LGBT community has an uproar. This is followed by a canned apology that probably wasn't even written by the athlete, and then the world moves on. It seems like the only lesson that is learned is I'm not supposed to say that in public, as opposed to actually seeing what the real harms of the comments are. There's a few exceptions. Tim Hardaway going from saying I hate gay people to actually becoming a pretty good LGBT advocate, and Kobe has done some nice things for the community as well. What do you think the key is to responding to scandals like this in order to have actual education take place?
I don't know. I think it's all part of it. I think the public reaction is a big piece. These guys want to make money. They want to be in commercials. They want to sell jerseys. Money talks. A public reaction to what they say is not good when it's hateful. And I would disagree with one thing that you say. You say the LGBT community reacts. It's one of the good things that the sports media does. They react to these things. It's front and center. CNNSI.com, Sports Illustrated's website. It is right there, front and center, when athletes say this. So I think it's the public reacting. That's a big piece. Clearly, what we would love to see, Tank Carter was a Cleveland Brown linebacker. He said something really stupid on Twitter last year. The Browns played a wait-and-see game. Let's see if the media buzz dies down, and it did after a day, so they did nothing with him. The Blue Jays had Escobar, right? He painted maricón, which is essentially faggot in Spanish, on his eye black during a game. They did a full training with him. That's what we would love to see. Somebody sit down. Chris Culliver with the Niners, he went through a lot of training, so we would love to see that. But I think the public reaction is a big piece because these guys want to make money off the public.
So let's talk money. It's one of the things that's brought up when talking about athletes coming out the most. We hear a lot about the financial implications of an athlete coming out. On Thursday in this conference, I'll be presenting a research project on how gay athletes are depicted on television. And I want to get your reaction to how Hollywood has depicted the financial issue. Let's take a look.
I explained to him that I could no longer conceal my sexual identity in good conscience.
And how did he respond?
He claimed I was no longer qualified to endorse his cereal product. He said my being a homosexual made me incapable of personifying a macho or a wholesome image.
Gay Anna Kournikova. What? The gay Anna Kournikova. Hold on a second here, guys. What are you talking about? This is not something we discussed. I don't think that.
I love it. I love it. I want to be the gay Anna Kournikova. I do.
Well, that's great. Settle then. This is brilliant. Wait a second. This is brilliant. This is exactly the kind of thing we've been groping for. It's a hook. You guys, that's where they pay the big bucks, right? I don't know about that. Fantastic.
Hey, babe. You're fired.
I was hoping you can fill me in on some gossip.
You heard the rumors. Rest assured, it's been contained. There won't be any damage to the team or your sale prospects.
Damage to prospects? You're kidding. In New York, it's going to be a marketing gold mine. Sit down, Nico.
Now, Clay could be our golden rainbow parachute.
How do you figure that?
Well, being the first team with an openly gay athlete would bring us tons of publicity. And people who love the gays will show up and cheer. People who hate the gays will show up and boo. Everybody wins.
Now, remember we talked about taking things slow?
Why doesn't Rex have to take it slow?
Rex Evans is the first openly gay player in league history. I mean, the guy's a walking milestone. Big brands came calling on their own.
I can be gay.
Nobody cares about Gay the sequel.
So there's been an evolution on this issue. I remember it always used to be people aren't coming out because they're going to lose endorsements. And then I heard Wade Davis, who we're going to have here on Thursday, talk about how endorsements are not a big issue for most professional athletes. It's kind of a 1% issue. And then now it seems like there's a niche community that people think will be very lucrative for athletes coming out. What do you guys think?
I think if the athlete came out, probably Nike, which gave $200,000, the LGBT Sports Coalition would embrace that guy, so probably get a lot of marketing opportunities. Mark Cuban, who was playing in Oakland there, is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, who said that he thought the first openly gay NBA player, and I think he meant someone who was actually more of a star, would make a killing in endorsements. So I think those days of not getting endorsements are over, and probably have some companies that would embrace an athlete just because of his sexual orientation.
Sid, I know you had a podcast where you disagreed with ESPN's Bomani Jones on this issue. Do you feel the same way that Jim does?
Well, it's funny, when Jason Collins came out of the closet, the narrative was, among many people, that he's coming out of the closet to ensure himself of a job because he now represents a marketing opportunity, and you know, if a team brings him in, they'll sell more tickets. When he came out, he instantly, overnight, became the highest-selling jersey for the Washington Wizards, who he was with, you know, until they released him, whatever, in the end of June. Now that he's not signed, the narrative is that him being gay is hurting his opportunities and that it's undermining his ability to make money. So I think that if, with any athlete, if done right, and you have the right personality and you're a good athlete, whether you're gay or straight, you're going to make money. I think the gay thing does offer a big opportunity. As Jason and Robbie Rogers have shown, there's an opportunity there to make some more money.
Jim mentioned Nike, and I see you're rocking the Nike rainbow shoes there. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship with Nike and how it came about and where it's going in the future?
So a couple years ago, a bunch of us just started talking about how to bring the LGBT sports movement together. Pat Griffin, who's an audience, many of you heard her talk earlier, was one of them. And we just started trying to figure out how to bring everybody into a room and figure out how we can work together to end homophobia in sports. We contacted somebody at Nike. They loved the idea, and they fully embraced everything that we've done. Nike is an incredibly LGBT positive company. They have a very strong LGBT and Friends employee network. They have a Be True line. That these shoes were last year's. This year there was a different kind of rainbow shoe. People say, you're wearing two different colored shoes. I'm like, really? I didn't know. It's a rainbow if you go from right to left. Anyhow, my friends in the Midwest don't get it. Anyhow, so it's a marriage, essentially. It's becoming a marriage with Nike and the LGBT sports movement.
So, unfortunately, Sid has to leave early to catch a flight, but it's definitely for a good cause. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're going?
The USOC, the U.S. Olympic Committee, and the NFL, and the PGA, and the NCAA are coming together to kind of have this diversity symposium, and Jim and I and Pat and a bunch of other people in our movement were invited, so my flight's at 4:30, and I don't want to miss it, so I gotta go, unfortunately.
Well, we wish you well.
But I'm being replaced by someone far more handsome.
Yeah. And Wade Davis, who will be speaking in this room on Thursday, is going to be there as well, so hopefully we'll be able to hear how the Diversity Summit goes. But please join me in thanking Sid Zeigler for his time.
I'm gonna take the water with me.
So I have a quick question for Jim. In 2011, the site ranked the 100 most important moments in gay sports history. Do you remember what you ranked number one?
Absolutely.
What was it?
It was the coming out of Dave Kopay in 1975.
So why is that so important? What made you choose that as number one?
He's probably the father of the modern gay sports movement. He played 9 years in the NFL, mostly with the 49ers, and he came out in the Washington Star right after he retired. Then became a big deal, and then he wrote a book that became a New York Times bestseller, and he's sort of been the person everyone has looked up to. I can't tell you how many people I've met who are not into sports who said they were a lonely gay person and they read Dave's book. I mean, I met someone who was living here from Malaysia, of all places, and he lived in a small village in Malaysia, and he learned to read English, and he was at some side, walking down the street, there was someone selling a bunch of books or giving away a bunch of books, and there's one called the Dave Kopay story, and he said he knew the person had no idea what the book was about. But it was in English, and this guy said he kept this book underneath his bed for like 3 or 4 years and read it every night just to say, oh, there's somebody else like me. So his coming out was kind of the reason a lot of other people came out. I mean, there's another NFL player in this room who came out as openly gay. He played with the Minnesota Vikings, Atlanta Falcons, Green Bay Packers, Sarah Tuaolo. Sarah, why don't you stand up a second? And Sarah can talk a lot. He has talked a lot about the influences Dave Kopay had on him. So I think that of all the things that have happened in the gay sports movement, Dave sort of coming out was the catalyst, and people owe him so much.
I agree. Now let's watch a quick video about Mr. David Kopay.
To know is to understand is to have knowledge is to tolerate, and to tolerate is to have peace. At the University of Washington, I played running back and also safety and linebacker. And I became a really good college football player. When I got to go to the All-American game in Buffalo, New York, and saw all these high draft choices around me, I realized that I could play in the National Football League. I played for San Francisco, Detroit, Washington, New Orleans, Oakland, and Green Bay. I retired in 1973. I knew that I was gay. It was very tough. Women would come around, and the players kind of liked that in me, but they couldn't quite understand why that I was always kind of dishing them off. It was a different world then. I'm really lucky that I'm still on this planet. Gay people were talked about being put into mental hospitals, and it was a mental disease, and all the hate that existed then was pitiful. I spoke out on December 9th, 1975. I was significant because I was the first. Writing my book was a chance to give the general public an insight to what gay people go through, and also give me a sense of what I believed and how I could contribute to the world. There was just a huge response. The book was chosen by the American Library Association then as a top 10 selection for suggested reading for all high school kids. Well, I did receive thousands of letters. Giving someone a sense of self-esteem and confidence is a
Earlier, but please welcome to the stage Mr. David Kopay. Thank you so much for being here, sir, especially since you've been under the weather recently.
I'm managing it. It's okay. Hi, everybody.
So you were an All-American running back at the University of Washington, which means that you played against USC. How did we fare against you and your Huskies?
Well, I thought I saw Pat Hayden out there running around the track before I came in. But in those days, let's face it, you grew up in Southern California, and that's basically what I did. You wanted to be chosen by USC to go to the school, or UCLA, and UCLA was the second fiddle at that time. I played, at Notre Dame High School. We had a real good conference, and to make all Catholics one thing, but you had to do a lot more than that to get a scholarship for USC. And obviously, over the years, your program has shown that. So I didn't get a scholarship, and when I didn't get the scholarship, it kind of put me in a funk, and I decided, well, maybe they don't think I'm good enough to play major college football. Maybe I'm not. And of course, I had a lot of self-doubts, because I had a lot of self-doubts about lots of other things too. So I went to Marquette University. They dropped football. The first year I was there, my freshman year, I hear once again from University of Washington, where my brother Tony accepted a scholarship, and he's now going to the Rose Bowl. I get a chance to see him play in the Rose Bowl, and I look at all these little guys, and compared to Marquette's team, which were all these big, strong, super, big guys. I thought, well, damn, Washington's kicking the hell out of Wisconsin, and I sure as hell can. I think I want to be part of them, part of that team, and I want to go there. So I decided I'd go to the University of Washington and study history and go on to law school. Well, that all changed once I got to university and started playing.
So what happened when you played USC?
Pardon me?
What happened when you played against USC?
Well, my senior year, we were 6-4 that year, and we beat SC. I think it was 21 to 6 or something. No, 21 to 14 or something like that. Hell, I've been hit in the head so many times I forget. So. But it doesn't much matter anyhow. But those years we played both ways, offense and defense, and I had been benched my whole junior year. I hardly played at all. I started off as a red-hot sophomore, and I played pretty well as a sophomore until the last few games, and I still wasn't quite accomplishing what the coaches wanted. And I kind of got benched, and then they kind of let me know that the next year was going to be hell. Well, I never did get the chance to play very much my junior year, but I decided once I was losing the affection of my fraternity brother and his attention, I decided, maybe I needed to get a little tougher. And I really wasn't the tough guy. I was a fairly good athlete, but I wasn't that natural tough guy. And I had a brother that was playing up there with the Rose Bowl teams, and now he was coaching, and he decided to try to kick me in the butt and make me the tough guy too. And I became that tough guy and wound up being, second team All-Coast and getting a chance to. I got elected co-captain of the team, and we went to the Rose Bowl where we lost to Illinois in 1963. So it was 50 years ago. I can't believe it.
Jim talked about this a little bit. Billie Jean King has said how much your book helped her coming out process. And every time I speak with Esera Tuaolo, he can't stop talking about how much you helped him. And last month on this campus, Jason Collins was here to speak, and I asked him about you. And he said that he had the opportunity to speak with you on the phone and that you were, quote, a very cool dude. Indeed. So how do you like being kind of in this patriarch role of all of the athletes coming out?
Well, it just kind of came, It's been it's been a real struggle, let me tell you, and it's been lonely. I'll tell you that too. But you know what? When I get the opportunity to hear people like Esera tell me how much my book meant to him and how important it was, and I went up to the Gay Pride in San Francisco 2 years ago and took part in the front runners different runs they had in Golden Gate Park, and people came over and did all different age groups and were just lining up trying to tell me the story about where they read my book standing in the counter in Des Moines, Iowa. They couldn't take the book home because someone would see them, and how good does that make you feel? You know what I mean? To give people a chance to feel what they need to know about themselves and to feel love from others instead of being someone thinking that they're more than what they are, I guess. I don't know how to quite say it.
Terrific. Going back to your playing days a little bit, the world largely knew Alex Karras from his hit role on the show Webster. You knew him as teammate and friend.
And now what the term is ally.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Alex Karras, as an actor, was a pretty decent actor, and he was with James Garner and Victor Victoria. He played his gay bodyguard. Alex, with me, when I went back to Detroit, I was traded made 2 mid-round draft choices to the Lions in 1968. And that was also the year they were filming Paper Lion, and I got to be part of that group. And just being around Alex, I'd always had decent games against the Lions, and he knew that I could play and was a tough guy. It proved to be a really, really a difficult year. The question again was about Alex and.
Yeah, and just what do you want the world to know about him now that he's passed?
Well, he was a wonderful, wonderful man,
Were you out to him?
I definitely loved Alex in a brotherhood sort of way, not a sexual way. Alex was kind of a big square guy, and that wasn't my shot. But he was just a wonderful man. He had so much humanity. He owned the tavern downtown. God, I'm having Jimmy Bucci-Caris's tavern, and I was there often. I was living downtown, and the Detroit Red Wings used to come in there, and the basketball team came in, and there was teams from all over the country would come in there all the time, and of course all the ladies thought, well, this is a good place to go meet an athlete, and so I was down there quite often, and the women were around me. I was a decent-looking kid in those days, and so he liked that, and he had enjoyed the fact that there was more women around. He was really a decent guy. Him and Paul Hornung were suspended by the National Football League for betting on themselves, basically. They never bet on other teams. But, who doesn't bet on the National Football League? I mean, everybody does, right? And of course, there was no specific rule, I don't think, at the time about doing so. And but Alex did, and I think after that happened, I think he had an empathy for others of being discriminated against for whatever reason. And Alex sensed right away that he thought I was gay, because I really just didn't care about maybe all the affection that the women were giving me, and that kind of teed off a lot of other guys and made a lot of other guys jealous too. And I could have cared less about them, But Alex, I did care about what he thought.
There was another ally in your life back then when you played for the professional football team in Washington, D.C. that shall remain nameless. You played for Vince Lombardi, a devout Catholic who studied to be a priest at one time, but also a coach who had a gay brother, a gay general manager, and a gay PR manager. What were your experiences playing for him? Do you think he would have been supportive?
I think, given the knowledge in today's world, Vince Lombardi would be a gay activist. I mean, he really was. I think Coach Lombardi maybe knew about Jerry at the time. He certainly knew about Ray McDonald, because Ray McDonald was a #1 draft choice out of Idaho, and he got caught in a couple of compromising situations that he shouldn't have been in, and the coach had to do something about him and let him go. But he didn't do it. He didn't let him go the first or second time. This was, 3 strikes and you're out. And so, so be it. I had no qualms about that. But Jerry, everybody really kind of.
Do you want to tell him who Jerry was?
Jerry Smith. He was finally, after all these years, I find out a few weeks ago that the National Football League is doing a documentary about him. Yet I find out from a friend, and it's like, well, wait a minute. How could they be doing a documentary to give it any kind of credibility if they didn't talk with me? I mean, it's just insane.
And why would they talk with you?
Well, when I was in Detroit, one game we had was against the 49ers in preseason. The Redskins in preseason, and the Redskins had a guy that was named Walter Rock, who I just saw up at the alumni reunion in San Francisco. And Walter Rock was a really good offensive tackle, and he brought it up to me. He says, "Dave, you're going to like when you get to the Redskins." He says, "We got a player that he's really special, and you guys are like 2 peas in the pod." Well, he was telling me he knew that I was gay, but he didn't say those words, But this whole knowledge that people didn't know players were gay in those days is a bunch of nonsense, because people knew. And people knew, certainly, Jerry had been with the Redskins his whole career, and they always knew, quote, he was a little different, but we also had players like Roy Jefferson on the team who were totally wild and wonderfully outrageous, who wore those Mod Squad costumes with the ass cut out, and he was a straight guy, I mean, and a wonderful, great player. He was all pro before he joined the Redskins with the Baltimore Colts. But you remember, I don't know if you guys are all too young to remember, in those days, it was the days of the discos, and the discos you could kind of go and feel safe in a place where there was like lots of people mixing, and you weren't necessarily gay or straight. It was like Studio 54 in a way, but not quite to that scale in Washington, D.C., down by the river, But it was really a kind of a wonderful place to go, really, to come out. And that's what happened to me, really. When I went to Washington, I started coming out. I also was being mentored or adopted into a brotherhood by David Slattery, the assistant general manager, who was a decorated World War II veteran, and Joe Blair, who was the Washington Redskins PR man.
Both were also openly gay, right?
Both were also homosexual, yeah. So people would say, well, didn't Lombardi know? Well, God knows. He think he knew about other people around him. I don't know. I didn't say that in my book because I thought that was way too controversial to say. And there was a lot of things that I couldn't quite say in my book then, because I don't know if you guys just remember, but it was only 1998 that Reggie White was out there blasting all kinds of, saying horrible things about the gay community and what we did or didn't do. And the National Football League shut up about it and was almost supporting him. So there's reasons sometimes you have to be quiet and go do, I don't know.
So you've been very open about your relationship with Jerry Smith. Recently, soccer great Abby Wambach married her teammate, Sarah Huffman. And earlier this year, NASCAR driver Danica Patrick started dating a competing driver, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. What do you think it will be like when we have an NFL couple who are open and together and on the same team or opposing teams?
I'd love to see it. I really would love to see it.
Will they be able to
say, well, gee, that's going to be so horrible. Well, why in the hell is it going to be so horrible? What? I don't get why it would be horrible at all.
Well, if you're a running back and your husband is a defensive lineman, are you going to be able to take a hit?
Well, to begin with, I don't think that would ever happen because I like the lean and mean type fellas. Not,
a safety or
I don't like the bulk. Now Sarah here, I might have to, go for a little meat. But no, I'm just kidding, Sarah. But no, I mean, I think people should loosen up about this stuff. My whole life is everybody when they ask questions like this, you're always supposed to be sour or down, or I'm done being down. I'm finished with all that. I live my life real simply now. I enjoy every moment I have. I'm above ground. I really do. And I know, unlike I was asked to be part of my Notre Dame High School Hall of Fame, their first class a couple of years ago, and they kept sending me what they wrote in my bio, and I kept changing it. And I said, I know I have made a difference. And they would write, Dave thinks he had made a difference. Well, there's a whole lot difference between I know and I think, I learned that from Coach Lombardi. He used to get up there and say, I know this play's going to work, I mean, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to beat them, And it wasn't kind of mealy, You guys have been through a lot of, or not a lot, a coach recently that was a little bit, I think, too soft,
You think Lane was too soft?
He just didn't seem to have a little passion, not the kind of passion that John Robinson had, or he just, to me, seemed to be soft. Now, I think he must be a good coach because he has to be. He comes from a great stock, you know. And he's always handled himself, I thought, fairly well. But he never really had, or the fun. He needed to have more fun, you know. And I think it's kind of great that the coach they have right now, the interim coach, is that kind of guy. You know, you don't have to be a GQ kind of guy to be a head football coach, you know.
You've been through a lot, and you've seen this entire debate from start to now over many years. When you look at the NFL right now and look at the openly gay athletes in today's society, what has surprised you the most? What did you not think you would ever see in the NFL that has happened?
Well, to begin with, our players' contract, they have protected us. A veteran like myself to have a partner to get their pension if you passed away. I think that's a big, huge step. I mean, I never ever thought that something like that could happen, and that's happened just the last 2 years. You know, there's been times where I've gone in and spoke to him about jerks like Al Davis. Al Davis was pretty pitiful. He was like George Allen, would say anything or do anything. I mean anything to win. I have some, that's not right. You got to play by the rules. You don't be passing out bennies at halftime. And George Allen was doing things like that, and I saw him, his guys doing stuff like that. George Allen was, I think, a really low-rent person,
We have a couple minutes for questions for either Mr. Kopay or Jim. Are there any questions?
No. I'm not going to attack anybody if you ask me a question. No? Okay. Well, I think your school is a wonderful place here. You guys are so, so lucky. I live right down the street from Occidental College, and I can't believe what a wonderful place that is. And believe me, you should be thanking the lucky stars you're in a place where you are, because this is a wonderful, wonderful campus and atmosphere here, and I'm proud to take part in your event. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have a question from Sarah.
I mean, this is not a question, it's a statement. What I wanted to say is, your book saved my life, and you know this. If a friend of mine did not give me your book at the darkest hour of my life, I would probably be 6 feet under. So I appreciate you, and
Thank you, Sarah. I love you for that. That's, hadn't I done my book, I don't think I would be on this planet today. I'd like to go into a little scenario here that I rarely ever talked about, and it's probably could get me in some trouble, but you know what? So be it. I came out here to California. I couldn't get a job anywhere after I spoke out and after I did a book tour of about 2 years. I mean, I did sell cars in San Francisco for a while, but I really hated it. And I thought, well, maybe I could, get into the steel business like a lot of other athletes, or something like that. But nothing came my way. So my uncle says, Dave, you need a job? Come to work for me. My uncle owned a store here in Hollywood called Linoleum City. And, here I was going to work at Linoleum City, stacking boxes of tile and hauling out big, heavy rolls of linoleum and loading the trucks for the studios. But I was in the store working all the time, and production designers would come in and they'd look at me, and a couple of them recognized me from different shows, from David Susskind or whatever show that I had done, the Tom Snyder show or whatever. And then they befriended me and supported me. And I'm talking about gay guys and straight guys. It didn't matter. I mean, they were, because most production designers are in the arts and they have a sense of real humanity, I think. And they supported me. then one day, about 2 years after I'm working at the store, a guy walks into the store, and he says, I look at him and I went, oh my God, Dr. Ed Geis. And he said, yeah, Dave, I come to see you, and I'm now living with my partner in Pasadena. Well, this guy was the head of orthopedic surgery at Ford Hospital in Detroit when I was with the Lions, and had a year that was just really devastating for me. I played the entire football year. This goes to something, I'm speaking to something that Sarah just said about saving his life. So he comes into the store, and I says, Dr. Geis, good to see you, you know. And I send out a crew to his place and give him an estimate on redoing his kitchen and service area. And he comes back in, and he's very friendly, and then he says, you know, Dave, I got to tell you this. He said, I knew you tore your ligaments and cartilage when you did it in training camp. And I went, what? How can you tell me that now? I knew you tore your ligaments and cartilage in your knee in training camp. And I went, I can't believe this. And I was really like in shock, because the year ended in Detroit in 1968 was the darkest year I ever spent, because it was a year of me facing up to my needs, coming out, and also a year where I was traded for 2 draft choices that I wanted to live up to the trade at least. After all, the 49ers had gotten me as a free agent, you know, they didn't cost them anything, you know, and they felt good about that. But so here I played the entire year in Detroit on one leg, where they tape your leg and then drain it on Friday and then drain it on Monday afterwards. And it was brutal. And of course, emotionally, I was going downhill and continued to go downhill and really became desperate. And I was also desperate because of my sexuality, if someone was going to find out. Luckily, Bill Munson, who was our quarterback, and Alex Karras, and myself, who they called the Three Amigos, they protected me. 2 straight guys protected me. They didn't know I was gay, but they knew I was gay, you know. But for the doctor to not tell me an injury of that importance that's unethical, totally, for his practice and everything else. I don't know if he's still alive today or not.
So
but this is a story that he told me. Pardon me?
Why did he do it?
He said I don't know, he didn't quite tell me why he did it. I asked him, I says, well, did someone specifically tell you? And he kind of, you know, he never really got into the details of why he did it. And I was so shocked that I didn't push back. But it was like, how in the hell can anybody do that? And I might not be on this planet today, because it was that time for me. I was so desperate that hadn't I been able to limp out on the field, maybe in that lonely hotel room in Detroit when it gets cold and dark in the wintertime, you know how it is, I might have chose to do something else. And believe me, and it was at that time, too, that I decided that I really needed more help emotionally, and went and got help, and did therapy for a number of years afterwards. But so I think you know, I don't feel like I'm any special person for doing what I did at the time, because I felt it was almost a football reaction, like just breaking a wedge of ignorance that I needed to do, because I wasn't getting any place at the time when I did speak out, you know. I was back in Washington, D.C. selling mirrors that was not really going to go through, and it was a really, really anxious and frustrating time. So anyway, so I never ever really have pictured myself as any kind of hero. I did what I needed to do, and I'm so glad the universe gave me the power to do it, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. One more round of applause for Mr. Dave Kopay and Jim Buzinski. Thank you very much.